to the session of the New Jersey Delaware Valley HIMSS Virtual Fall Conference. My name is Fred Molinari. I'm a board member for the New Jersey chapter. I'm currently chair of events and VP-elect for next year. We had some great presentations this morning with the feature of the dating game earlier, and it's now my pleasure to introduce our closing keynote presentation, Diversity in Healthcare IT. Before we get started, I have a couple quick housekeeping announcements. We want to thank our New Jersey Delaware Valley chapter sponsors. Without you, we would not have been able to make this fantastic virtual event possible. So please take the time to visit the vendors, the virtual showcase, spend some time, ask some questions, and get some value from our vendors. Second, as I mentioned, during the webinar, you'll be able to type in questions by clicking the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We will allow time at the end of the session for addressing your questions at the end of the presentation. Third, make sure you do stay on for the duration of the event, because at the end of the event, as you heard before, we will pick one winner for a $200 gift card at the end of the session. So thank you again for attending. I would like to turn the session over to Jackie Bowman and Ricky Jennings from Zebra, one of our valued vendors, sponsors, who will introduce our closing keynote speaker, Cletus Earle. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred, and thank you for having us today. I'm Ricky Jennings with Zebra Technologies. I'm the Chief Nursing Informatics Officer for our North America healthcare team. Zebra has over 50 years of experience in innovation. Our history is rooted in barcode scanning and has evolved to encompass market-leading solutions for patient identity, mobile collaboration, and real-time intelligence. You may recognize us within your own facility through our printers, scanners, patient wristbands, or even our mobile computers. With our experience spanning multiple verticals, we do not simply bring solutions from other industries into healthcare. We recognize that technology innovation in healthcare requires a unique understanding of the challenges and critical workflows in the patient care environment. Our 300 plus specialized healthcare products are designed from the ground up, creating identity, mobility, and intelligence technologies that are tailored to the specific needs of its people and workflows. In patient identity, we integrate barcode solutions that are designed with the patient and most importantly, the user in mind, helping health systems enhance patient care and ensure safety throughout the entire patient journey. In fact, our wristbands have actually identified nearly 2 billion patients globally since 1998. With mobile collaboration, we provide mobile solutions that are purpose-built for the point of care and seamlessly integrate to numerous platforms across an enterprise, which enables stronger collaboration and clinical integration. This purpose-built design of our mobile tools enables technologies to withstand the rigors of today's environment. So thinking from humble specs to disinfectant-ready housing that can withstand repeated wipe down with hospital-grade disinfectants, which enables our clinicians to utilize mobile devices and stay connected while also adhering to infection prevention protocols, even in the most sensitive of environments. And lastly, with real-time intelligence, we enable real-time visibility to location conditions for patients, providers, and critical assets, providing insight, right, and contextual awareness for better, more timely decision-making. I want to thank you again for allowing us to have this time today. The Zebra team is in the exhibit hall mentioned earlier. Please join them in a chat to learn more. And I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Jackie Bowman, now.
Awesome. Thank you, Ricky. I have the pleasure and the honor of introducing Cletus. So if you don't know Cletus, as a Senior Vice President and Chief Information Officer, Cletus Earle provides vision and leadership for developing and implementing information technology initiatives across Penn State Health and Penn State College of Medicine. Prior to 2019, his arrival in Hershey, Cletus was a Senior Vice President and a Chief Information Officer for Kaleida Health and Great Lakes Health of Western New York. There, he provided leadership for the IT team, overseeing strategic and tactical planning, plus development and coordination for the IT platform. We are very, very excited to have Cletus be our keynote speaker this afternoon and to present on diversity in healthcare IT. This is such a relevant and important topic today. So Cletus, with that, I will turn it over to you.
So thank you very much. I really appreciate the introduction. Jackie and Ricky, it's a pleasure. Thank you. I want to thank the New Jersey and Delaware Valley HIMSS chapter for inviting me to speak on such an important topic. I have to give this group a significant amount of credit to being able to challenge ourselves, to think about how our world is changing and evolving, and being able to have that difficult discussion and with the hopes of moving forward and moving this forward. But before I start, I have to tell you, it's interesting. This is the first time I've put on a suit and a tie in about 8 months in this COVID world. So I'm a little uncomfortable. So it's interesting how quickly I've gotten used to not necessarily having to put on this gear. So again, it's just a pleasure, but I appreciate it. So what I wanted to do is start off by really discussing, what we should be focusing on. And at the end of the day, Dr. Maya Angelou has a small snippet of a video you can watch about just doing right. And I wanted to just, talk about and read off her quote. So just do right. Right may not be expedient. It may not be profitable, but it will satisfy your soul. It brings you to the kind of protection that bodyguards can't give you. So try to live your life in a way that you will not regret years of useless virtue and inertia and timidity. This is the ethos that I think has driven us, and we will continue to drive us as a great country, that we continue to do right. And at the end of the day, it will be all worth it. So again, I wanted to just touch base on where we are. And I wanted to start off with something of a topic, which is my why. And I share with you my why for a reason, because I'm pretty sure we all have our own whys. And my why, funny enough, when I was trying to tell you, this is my family. It's an older picture, but it's a jovial one. And I'm pretty sure as many of you could relate, as I was trying to find a picture, we're actually 6 of us, so one's missing. This is a one's missing picture. But it's the older the kids get, it's harder to find a group picture. So that was a lesson learned for me. And that tends to be the theme, that you realize things later, and then you realize that you can do something about it. So just really wanted to touch base on who I am. That is not necessarily in the introduction that Jackie spoke about. So I've been a CIO for quite a bit of years, but prior to that, I'm a kid born out of New York City in the 70s, 80s. I'm one of those kids, and I can tell you, I had the unfortunate ability to grow up in New York City when the city was ravaged by the drug epidemic. And it was at a point as just a kid who had earlier, my parents were together, a middle family household, that we went from a middle family household and my parents divorced. So I got to see 2 different worlds, being able to, parents were managers and then divorce, seeing how the dichotomy changes. And as a kid going to high school in the 80s in New York City during that drug epidemic time, it was a very interesting dynamic. And in my school, I chalk it up to lessons learned. And as you could imagine, we all have those situations where you look back and you say, where was my pivot? And my pivot was a teacher talking about us, talking to us and saying to us, look around. It was a school class size of about 30 to 35 people. And the teacher said, based on what she's seeing and what the data is showing, the statistics are showing, that 2 or 3 of us would end up dead. I went to a predominantly African-American school in Southeast Queens. And it was a jarring statement that it was a possibility that I would end up dead just because of the stats. And that's in the 80s, and it's ironic because a lot of those same statistics ends up applying. May not be to the young African Americans, but it could be to the Latinx and other types of community. It could be to the LGBTQIA. There's just so many parallels that the experiences that I had 30, 40 years ago than what I am experiencing today. So it just says how the world is cyclical, and we have to start to think about, again, the why. And I know my why is not that much different from you all, right? Everybody experiences their own why. We realize why we got into the industry. We realize why we're doing it. And my why is definitively driven by my family. I want to make sure that they have the right capabilities and the right aspects, and particularly for my children, just like I know many of you have children, nieces, nephews, cousins, uncles, brothers, sisters, wives, husbands. You're driven by those same parallels. And once we start to think about those and realize the connections, we realize that we're not that much different, right? And we know that, but I think in today's times, we have to be reminded that we're not that much different, because you start off in the why. Well, my other why of getting into healthcare, because I did navigate different industries being in New York, getting into healthcare, I come to find out that this was one of the only industries that I could actually do something about it. I wasn't a doctor, wasn't a nurse, wasn't going down that direction, but I was able to go into an industry that I know I can change the lives of those who we care for. And that would be our friends and families and others. And I wanted to make sure I continued to strive in that way. So got into the industry. I was able to, over a course of many years, I was able to navigate my way to becoming a CIO. And as Jackie indicated, I ended up going into as a CIO. I went into an association, and it was CHIME. The CHIME is the sister company to HIMSS Association. And CHIME is the College of Health Information Management Executives. And 20 years ago, it was interesting going into CHIME because although budding CIO, but had so much opportunity and see. And then I have to tell you, one of the first things that I noticed coming in was the fact that there were a lot of people there, and after the awe of being where I am, I realized that there are not a lot of people that looked like me. As a matter of fact, there were many men and many Caucasian men that were representative of CIOs. And at the time, I didn't think of it. I continued head down and continued to push forward. But that was the representation. I knew that many of those men were older, gray hair, and aging. And I mentioned those things because I thought about it at the time that, is that a reflection of where we're going as an industry? The industry was evolving. We were coming up to meaningful use. There was so much change that was required. It was interesting at that time that there was a lot of resistance to change. There was a lot of resistance to us evolving. And it was a very interesting time. So as that continued, my career continued, the years continued to evolve. I decided to run for the board of CHIME, and many years later, I ran for the board of CHIME, and I had the distinct pleasure of being voted to become on the board and represent our CIOs, CTOs, and CISOs of the world, and represented over 57 countries. I was excited, elated, the fact that it was it. And then on top of that, a few years later, I had the ultimate honor of being selected as the chairman of the board for CHIME. And this was by a great set of colleagues, esteemed and world-class CIOs around the globe that helped get me into the chair, elected me as a chair. And I felt, a pressure, but the responsibility to try and change. And being one of the first African-American chairs, it's not about your color, but it definitely had weight associated to it, because the 20 years that has transpired from the very first day that I came to the time I ended up being elected, again, I looked at the landscape and I saw many men and many Caucasians, but there was progress. I did start to see many women start to, not many, but women were starting to be represented. Great. I was very happy. We started to see other ethnicities starting to be represented in as CIOs. That was great. Interesting enough, though, I did recognize that I did not see the Latinx community represented, and I did not see an increase in African Americans. And it was a very low amount. And I noticed that there was a problem, and I felt that something had to change. And again, going back to why. The why is, if we're going to make a difference, we have to change. I realized that my daughters, and I'll be very honest with you, I was somewhat selfish, that once I started to realize that my daughters, in as far as them coming into the industry or coming into work, they would not have the same opportunities that was even, given to me because of the challenges that women experience in technology. And we know, we've heard many transactions around STEM, but I felt that I needed to do something for my daughter. And I felt, again, as selfish as that may be, I know that I could do something and I'm in a position. So we started off an effort, and I wanted to create a legacy to talk about diversity. This is before diversity became a major initiative, but I wanted to make sure that we really address it as an industry. So we created the first diversity initiative in Chime. There was another version of the Women in Chime. So what we did was we partnered together with the Women in Chime and tried to figure out how we were going to work together to really identify and address diversity as a whole. And we know there are about 26 different initiatives that are considered diverse. So it's not all about race. It's not about color. It's not all about gender. It's not about the sexual orientation. But there's so many other elements that are associated to diversity. Another thing ended up coming up where it prevented me to look at the world, and again, I had to have that aha moment internally, was an event that I went to, which was sponsored by the Association for the Visually Impaired. The association I went to through a dining in the dark activity. And my wife and I attended the event a few years ago, and I had another aha moment. I had the aha moment because if you've ever been to one of these events, or if you haven't, what they do is they blindfold you and you go through an eating event, like you're going to any other type of gala, and you're challenged to eat blindfolded. And you realize that, by this particular situation, that those who are visually impaired, the challenges that they are experiencing on a day-to-day basis, we just take for granted. And I came out of there and saying that something needs to be done and we must do more. And that's another aspect of diversity, of what can we do to be able to move the dial forward. So as we went on the journey, as I continued on my personal journey of figuring out how we can do things differently, we have to do something. We have to, what I've come to realize is you have to acknowledge, right? And that's unfortunate, and sometimes it doesn't occur. We don't acknowledge. And I would like to start off by acknowledging, in this case, diversity and some of the challenges that we have when it comes to what there's some adverse events that's been going on in our world, is acknowledging. And I would like to start off by saying the names: Oscar Grant, George Floyd, Jonathan Ferrell, Christian Taylor, Eric Gardner, Sandra Bland, Kamani Gray, Kendrick McCade, Freddie Gray, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, Tamir Rice, Trayvon Martin, Sean Bell, Phil Castillo, and Natasha McKenna. We have to say their names. Let's acknowledge it. And let's start off by saying, when we're acknowledging this, let's say, okay, we know there's an issue. Now let's move forward and try to figure out what we could do. How we can actually do it is going with solidarity, whether it's, disabilities, whether it's genderism, whether it's racism. Let's figure out what we can do together to help move the dial and try to acknowledge this. And I would encourage you all that you be able to reach out and talk to your staff, talk to your neighbors, talk to your families, and really start to, be able to acknowledge and act in solidarity on how we can do things differently. no different than me, realizing that there was a challenge, knowing that there were some gaps, and then figuring out some of the things that you can say when you're going and speak to people. I would encourage you to speak to people and say, I can't imagine what this is like for you. I want to be in this with you. I'm on your team. How do we work to fix this problem? Scourge ourselves. I challenge and I commend all of you. Right now, I know we have about 134 people that are on this call. You wouldn't be on this call if it wasn't important to you. So I applaud you for doing that, applaud your efforts, and thank you. But again, trying to figure out what we can do to moving forward and getting past this scourge. So again, the key here is working towards racial justice, working towards all of the things that we can do together, making a commitment, being able to say, how do we do things? We want to make a commitment. Just like, many countless people have done before, whether it was the women's movement with voting, whether it's, the civil rights movement, we have to commit to making a change. And we have to say to ourselves, I will lead by example. I will listen, learn, and understand. I will be kind and compassionate. I will commit to doing better. What you can do is face your own discomfort. Have that crucial conversation. Applaud the effort that you're going to say, I am not going to do the status quo. I will not be silent. I will make sure that whether it's an issue with race or an issue with genderism or racial issue with just bias as a whole, be able to do that. Speak to your family and children about racism. What I won't recommend you do coming Thanksgiving is to go out and go after that uncle that has a way. And I'm going to be very transparent with you. Look, people grew up in certain times, right? And I get it. We all get it. And you're not going to be able to convince people to change their dynamic and change their narrative overnight or over the Thanksgiving dinner table. But understand that, we can do this together if we start, just having interesting discussions, listening to people, being able to understand what they're doing. Research on your own, that is imperative. We have to understand that education, where we've come from, we've been educated in different areas, different regions. All education is not equal. I think all of us know that by now. We need to, it's very easy today because what we have with the internet and with 5G and all the other things that we heard, we can actually we can download a lot of information relatively quick. So we don't have an excuse anymore not to be able to go out and really find the truth. I know we have a lot of fake news out there. I get it. But there are also ways to get definitive information so that you are able to come to your own conclusion by finding the true evidence that's out there that would help support. Participate in planning sessions and activities and professionally and personally. Really try to face off in your own organization. Recently, it was very interesting. I had through LinkedIn, through social media, I had a company, a healthcare system in Arizona, reach out to me to talk to their staff. Now think about this for a second. The staff who had an affinity group decided that they wanted to do something about it. The staff, not management, not leadership, decided that they wanted to do something, and they invited me to come and speak to them. Was it a little odd? Absolutely. But I give them so much credit for being able to say, we are not going to stand by and not do something about it and be able to talk and plan and participate. That's going to be imperative. And as all of you as leaders, I would encourage you all to do the same. Challenge yourself, do it professionally and personally. So some other things that you could work on as far as organizational activities as you try to look at within. You heard me talk about affinity groups a little while ago. The affinity groups is a major area so that you can move forward. Challenges, creating challenges, train and coach, establish hotlines, put policies together, and you can go after the Rooney Rule as well. We'll go into each one individually. So affinity groups, you've probably heard about this already, but it's really talking about creating community, belonging, awareness, and celebration. Examples of affinity groups is create in your areas, places where people of like minds, like efforts, like activities feel safe together. There's ability to create disability affinity resource network groups. There's groups on women in medicine and science. There's groups on interfaith affinity resources network groups, the LGBTQIA and other alias affinity resource network groups. There's military veteran affinity groups, multicultural affinity groups, as well as the next gen. We have to think about that too, because as we're in healthcare, we continue to think about how are we going to meet the people in the different areas of where we're defined. We're bound by that approach today, whether it's our customers, which are our patients, or our employees. We have to figure out models that I call it, a generational strategy of how we're going to deal with the greatest generation, the baby boomers, the Generation Xers, the millennials, and the Ys and Zs. We're going to have a multi-pronged approach on how we're dealing with different generations, not only just from a support structure, but how we deal with them as customers as well, because each group is going to be different. Each group is going to have a different need and opportunity, and we need to manage and navigate around that specific group. Challenges, if you're in healthcare, particularly if you have doctors or nurses, we're talking about a lot of A-class, A personalities. There's nothing to be lost on challenges. So challenges can be around inclusion, engagement, knowledge, leadership, doesn't matter, but you need to start somewhere. Find and participate in racial justice challenges found on the internet. Develop your own racial justice challenge, inclusive of videos, podcasts, books, discussions, connecting and engaging with others, and more. I'll stop there for a second. I'm part of an organization that I have to say, because I've been in other organizations that are not necessarily having this top of mind, but my existing organization, Penn State Health and Penn State University, we've decided that we're going to make a difference. And it really does start from the top, but it doesn't have to. As an example I gave you, it can start from other areas of your business and grow up as well. But we decided as a leadership team to do a 22-day challenge. And this was led by our Chief Diversity Officer. It mandated that all of us as leaders, as executives, go through a 22-day challenge where every day we needed to learn something and dedicate something about diversity in all these different various affinity groups. It was an amazing journey, because not only that we just went ahead and did it, whether it was books, whether it was movies that were recommended, whether it were TED Talks, short videos, YouTubes, we allowed us to look at different aspects and learn more. I was able to learn much more than I ever did. And I thought I knew something about the world. And the key here, once we were done, we were going to articulate how each challenge basically challenged our thought process. And we're getting back together as a group. But we didn't stop there. What our executive team decided to do is we're going to make this challenge across the entire Penn State family. So 22,000 people are now going to be challenged to do the same thing. And it's a process. It's not going to happen overnight, but it's that journey that develops the process, that develops the journey. And I'm very excited and very proud to be part of an organization. But I can tell you, any one of us can do it if we just start somewhere. Practice and implement what you learn, and coach and mentor others. That is extremely effective. We have to get out there and make sure we're mentoring, and we continue to reach back into the communities that are underserved and underrepresented and be able to help. And again, it's not all about race. There's socioeconomic components that are, if we haven't learned anything from COVID, we know that that has been impactful for us. Conduct town halls to share what you've learned and challenge others to join you. Again, don't mean to call out what we're doing as the definitive example, but we, in the last several months, what's been going on, our organization, we've been able to establish 22 town halls, and the first sessions were, listen and learn sessions. We listened to our employees. We listened to what they were experiencing, and I have to tell you, it was pretty hard to listen, to see how many people were impacted negatively, just the day-to-day, how they're working, being able to listen, but then more importantly, do something about it. You need action. You need to be able to say, we've heard you loud and clear. Now let's put together a plan to create action. And that's imperative in order to do that. And it doesn't just stop on your employees, but you remember our employees are being challenged too, right? They are, not only their employees, but their family members, their kids, my kids, they're being impacted in such adverse ways in today's world. We need to be able to be there for them. If we've learned anything from watching the activities of the protests that have been going on, you can see that those that are protesting, a good portion of them don't happen to be people of color. They're white Americans that are saying, we're going to do something. A lot of young white people are saying, we're done. That's one thing this generation has showed us. And I can speak on behalf of mine, where I believe our generation failed. This next generation is not going to tolerate, just the status quo. And no matter what we may say about the generation, they sure are showing us how to do things. And I'm very excited to see what this generation, as they continue to evolve and become the new leaders and replace us, what they're going to do for us. This is going to be amazing. Keep the conversations present. Let's not forget that, what happens today is not what's going to happen tomorrow, and because tomorrow is going to be a new challenge. Train and coach, model, identify, respond, and empower. Develop and deploy training across your organizations, including unconscious bias training, microaggression training, transgender toolkits, patient bias, upstanding and inclusivity practices. These are extremely important. In my organization, I have to tell you, one of the things I mentioned about what I did in Chime and what I noticed, the organizations that I've gone through as a leader, it's very interesting. When you come in as a new leader, you're doing your assessments, and many of the organizations that I've gone through, I've noticed the same thing, that there's opportunity. I look at, how is our LGBTQ representation? How are we addressing our restrooms? How are we looking at, different things that are going to be these kind of challenges that we have for our employees? We need to look at that, and we need to train and coach and think about inclusivity. Implement and configure information systems, EMRs, ERPs to leverage inclusive pronouns and indicate preferred names. Educate and coach staffing on how to have appropriate conversations to gather information. Model expected behavior and coach staff on expected behavior. Pronouns are very important. We decided that we're going to make sure we push out pronouns on the bottom of our email signatures. What we were able to do is we put pronouns there, and we said we want to make sure that we show support why pronouns are important, and making sure in the hyperlink and those signatures, there's the rationale of why pronouns are so important. Again, you have to start somewhere, and train and coach is essential to that. Hotlines, when you're talking about report, understand, act, trend. Create a hotline for reporting microaggressions and other acts of injustices. Increase the awareness and understanding of racism and other diversity concerns within your organization. Be transparent with information collected. Preserve confidentiality, but share high-level dashboards so leadership and staff can understand the trends. Understanding and creating in this hotline, creating safe space, making sure from a patient side that patients and employees that, as an organization, you have to put down parameters and say, we're going to support our patients. We're going to support our employees, and ensuring that you put in policies in place that if the patient decides that they're not happy with the person who's taking care of them because of whether any type of bias, the organization needs to support that employee. We have to be behind them. We have to put policy in place to ensure that we are going to change the narrative. We are not going to tolerate that bias towards our employees, because if you do that, what ends up happening is your experiences that your employees will have will just continue to deteriorate, and then they lose confidence in what you're doing. So there's opportunity. And I just mentioned about, that's basically policy, but again, develop, adopt, and refine, protect. Develop policies that support diverse employee populations, including zero tolerance policies. That's what I just mentioned a few minutes ago. Accessibility standards and inclusive interview and hiring practices. Deploy an organizational change management strategy to ensure successful adoption and behavior change in support of those policies. And review, refine annually to ensure applicability and inclusion of new laws and regulations and standards. Things are changing all the time. Again, what's today, what's old is new. We need to continue to evolve because the world is changing, and we have to not pretend that the world is not changing around us, and we have to have policy that accommodates. So the Rooney Rule. Many of you already probably know what the Rooney Rule is. I'm not saying this because we're in Pennsylvania and we have the Pittsburgh Steelers. So the Steelers have created, adopted a fair and equitable inclusive hiring practice. This has been around for quite some time, as they wanted to make sure that they have underrepresented people included in hiring practices. So, one of the things that you could do that's easy, require that at least one woman or one underrepresented minority would be considered in the slates of candidates for either every open position or every open senior position within your organization. Luckily for us, as a senior level, we've decided to do that as a Rooney Rule. But what I wanted to do is take that further. Even though it wasn't mandated for the entire organization, I wanted to make sure that is a principle that every one of us does in our division. I have a pretty big division, IT division, and I want to make sure I'm challenging our team to do that. So every time that there's a new hire, I'm asking my team 2 questions. Was the candidate pool diverse? And is the selected candidate diverse? Not saying that we need to hire diversity every time, but I want to ingrain upon our teams and our hiring practices that we're keeping that in mind. And when they come to me, they're going to ensure that the candidate pool was diverse. We're always going to hire the right person. We're not going to put people in who are not qualified, but we do need to be able to expand the pool to be able to do this. Because think about this. First and foremost, the evidence suggests that, and the evidence definitely implies that people who are different work better together. We don't want robots. We don't want people that are going to just all think the same. We want people as leaders. We want people who are going to challenge each other, that are going to push the envelope. And until you're able to bring in that kind of diverse group of people working together, you're not going to get that push. So I really encourage you all to think about the Rooney Rule. Think about different social economic perspectives, people that come from all varying backgrounds. Challenge them. If somebody who has a different set of perspectives, they're going to bring something to the table that you may not have ever thought is going to be applicable to you as you move forward. In your community, one of the things that you can do is go out and do outreach. Let's learn from COVID-19. Let's not pretend that there's disparities between certain communities, and understand that if we ignore education, ignore health, what COVID-19 has been able to show us, and this coronavirus epidemic, is that the chicken will come home to roost, that it will eventually catch up with us as a society. And the fact that if we're not focusing on specific communities and we disregard them, and then things like a pandemic come up, then it will impact us adversely as a society. And that was a perfect example on why you see disparate communities being impacted, because of lack of understanding education and availability to healthcare and other factors. So what does the COVID-19 data show us? It shows us elements. I'll talk about that in 2 seconds. We have to understand, did we fail marginalized populations? Did we provide appropriate service, education, interpretation services, internet, and other technologies? Did marginalized populations trust us? In many communities, again, we're talking about New Jersey and the Delaware Valley. In many communities, does your facility, does your organization represent the community you serve? You have to think about that and realize that, how do we get in there? Whether it's interpretation services, how do we change that and make sure that we are, when it comes to communication, that we are addressing our languages that are there. If I don't know how many of you have gone through the languages that you have from your EMR systems, right? And your registration systems. In many cases, you have dozens and dozens of different languages. Where I came from before, we had one particular area that had over 20 different dialects, and in the Nepalese communities. So we have to think about, well, if we're really talking about doing something different, let's focus on how do we take care of those patients? How do we create interpretation services that are going to, have different outcomes for those people that we're serving. So we need to do things a little differently. So let's just go into the data. Again, I think it's, as IT people, as engineers, as people of science, I think it's much more appreciated by looking at the information. And you can see it's very evidence that the cases are 2 times higher for Native Americans, as well as 2.6 times higher for African American and 2.8 higher for Latinx populations. Hospitalizations for Native Americans are up 5.3 times higher, 4.7 respectively, and 4.6. And more disturbing, the death rates are 1.4, 2.1, and 1.1% higher respectively. And if we talk about hospitalizations and pertaining to race, the data is evidence. This is CDC information. This is not fake news. This is exactly what it is, right? We're able to just pull this information out and really say, how is this data? What is it saying? And what it's telling me and how I interpret this data is that we have to do things a little differently to, again, address the people that we're serving. So in our community, how can we make a difference? In IT, we're at the extreme benefit. We have a significant amount of tools at our exposure, and I think we can learn by that. So again, outreach, it's extremely important. Learn from COVID-19, try to figure out what we've done and how we continue. We know we're about to encroach upon the second wave, and some of you, as a matter of fact, in the Pennsylvania, Delaware Valley, as well as New Jersey areas, I think we're going through our second wave. So we know it's going to come right back. Let's try to figure out how we stay ahead of it this time. Build trust and opportunities in our communities, particularly for the marginalized and underserved. Develop initiatives and programs that are accessible to all. Again, I mentioned interpreter services. You can start off by looking at, I think what we're dealing with, this is just like obesity. This is an issue that's systemic. This is an issue that is prevalent. And with any issue like obesity, you have to start early. You have to reach out into communities, and I would challenge you all to reach out into your communities and see, go to the schools, share your skills, reach out to your staff members. Many times, some of your staff members are already doing it. Create a program to say, how do I go into the school systems? How do I connect with the mayors? How do I connect with the local people, the local school districts? And being able to say, as an IT professional, we can share our skills with those communities. We could share our skills with kids that are not aware of technology, bringing in STEM, bringing in engineering, all of the different things that we can bring to these communities to say there are other things out there besides what they see, which is being an influencer now in social media, or a rapper, or a athlete. There are other things. Most people, I go to schools out there and I say that I'm a CIO. They have absolutely no idea what a CIO is. And I think that you all would have that same reaction if you talk to kids. And I think the only way we need to do this is dealing with it as a community outreach perspective. Go into the schools, be able to, do, the sharing of what your jobs are to those kids, starting at young age, starting at the third grade level, being able to go into high schools and offer mentorships for those, offer internships to see what we can do to bring our experiences to other around technology, data, leadership, and healthcare, and much more, because many of you are vendors out there and our partners. You have the ability to extend your expertise in these regions as well. And actually, sometimes as your companies, they do perpetuate that. One of the more successful programs I did was partnering up with a major Silicon Valley company that they do this. They actually do it, and they have resources to come to bear. I did a really great program where we were able to connect with a local school district, as well as some private schools. And that particular company invested in bringing in resources to help educate. What I did from our organization, I looked at our cycles of our computers that are in the community, and I said, hey, we have training computers that are not being used during the weekend, right? Because it's just not being used. How do we then utilize that technology, give it up to the community so that they can start to be educated on some of the solutions and tools out there? And it was a resounding success. That's how you are able to kind of, you don't have to spend much. You don't have to do much of anything besides commitment of time, in many cases, to be creative, to be able to reach back into the community and exposing them to much more than what they're aware of. Be present in elementary through college to drive interest and confidence in IT careers. So I went on, but I hopefully I was able to jar some conversations and some thoughts. And it was, again, absolutely a pleasure talking to you, but I want to make sure we have time to communicate and talk through some questions and answers. So with that, I'll turn it over. Nina. Anita, I don't think we can hear you, unless it's just me. Hey, Fred, anybody else?
Yeah, no, Cletus, this is Jackie. I can't hear. Nina, I think you're on mute.
Okay, you should be able to hear me now.
There you go.
Yep, we got you.
Okay, great. Sorry. You'll have to appreciate I'm a novice. I think everyone overrated skills and said, "Oh, you've done Zoom all the time," but this is actually my first time as a moderator. So thank you for bearing with me. But Cletus, I have to say, you sharing your journey, the walk you've walked to bring us what you have today, it's such a story to go from your my why to where you are and what you're bringing to us. It's definitely very real in the real world, and it certainly has made me pause and consider my own approach and perspective in my day-to-day world. We do have a couple of questions, so if I could bring those up. We've had a couple of very interesting questions. One is a question of perspective. It's from someone in the audience who is a female of color, and her question is about reverse racism, and that it's kind of an interesting focus. And what are your thoughts about that? Because there really hasn't been much of a conversation about reverse racism.
Is there possible, no pun, can I get a little color on that? So the reason why I say that, reverse racism, it's real, right? But are we talking about, black on black racism, white on white racism? What are we referring to? Just curious.
Yeah, there's another clarifying statement that says, did this create, did you find, hold on a second. Yeah, just how is this in your day-to-day world? Like, are you seeing that people are responding a little differently in terms of in your office setting? Have people accepted what you've been promoting? Are your hiring managers embracing this, or what has been the perception of your team and how they've started to work with this in a challenging environment?
Yeah, so great question. So it is an evolution, right? We are, and again, I always go back to journey. We are in the process of doing it. Hopefully I didn't give the different perspective that we have it all down. We don't. I don't think anybody has it down. But my team has been part of that journey. And I have to tell you, there's another thing that I do is I have a leadership meeting, and as we all do, right? And one of the things that I have started each one of my meetings with is starting off with first and foremost, always talking about engagement, really focusing on our staff, because in these troubling times, these crazy times, as everybody's working home, people are, even though we haven't done layoffs, people's, their family members have been laid off. We really want to focus on the well-being of our employees, right? So really focusing on how we're doing with engagement. What are we doing different? What kind of fun things that we can do and how we can normally change that. But the other aspect is starting off with, I start off with TED Talks or YouTubes to show like snippets, very similar to just getting people to see, the different components of diversity, that it's touching many topics. So again, not always about race. Today's yesterday's initiative was about how to communicate with transgenders, right? And that very main topic. And another one was about how to deal with, how to navigate with disabilities. And there's plenty of TED Talks that are out there that it's always sometimes better to hear from somebody else, right, than hear from me. I'm only there 10 months, but after a while, that's what it is. But I think what ends up happening though is they start to, I watch, I'm a watcher. I mean, I think of myself as a broke anthropologist, studying of people. And while I look at people while they're doing it, I can tell you that there is an impact, no doubt. Now, there's some people that obviously don't, they're not going to get there, and that's okay. Our organization's decided we're doing it. But I've seen an impact. I've seen where people, and sometimes pause. And that same journey that I talked about, like I mentioned, the dining in the dark, I think, my awareness was the fact that I didn't realize. Just didn't realize. I didn't realize as a male, I didn't realize that, I've heard the plights, don't get me wrong. I just didn't realize until I had my daughter, right? And my daughters. And again, I tell you, I'm being honest, it was selfish. But I think once you start to touch that side and get everybody to start to see the varying components of what diversity is, whether it's veterans and people coming home and not getting the support they need, and we not going, as industry, our obligation to go out to our veterans and try to hire them. They're the best. And then look what's happening, right? Committing suicide and what's happening. We need to support them, right? So there's so many components that if, Nina, that the components of diversity doesn't touch somebody, you're probably living under a shell. I'm just, and I don't mean to be flippant by that, right? I mean that because there's so many,
I get it.
so robust that it should impact somebody, and it should pull on or draw on the heartstrings of other individuals.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think that at times our own bias gets in the way, and it might not just be, as you pointed out, it might not just be race, but there's so much around gender, or maybe you're not pro-military. You could have, look at what everyone went through in the 60s. When they came home, they were spit on, and today we can't wave enough banners about our military. Right. So I think you bring up such a good point about how time, each generation or each phase of our existence that we're going through, something else is rising to the top. And it's so important that what we're talking about now is current today. The fact that you brought up generational response, that really resonated with me. I'm a boomer, and trying to have a conversation with a millennial is sometimes not so easy for me when it comes to how we live our life. So it's going to be very interesting as time goes on to see, what we can do to make that conversation much easier.
Yeah, Nina, one of the things I'm very concerned about is our youth, the kids that are in school right now, whether they're in whether elementary up to college, and the way that they are now trying to adjust. I could just speak for my kids in almost in a Freudian way, right? You start with what you know. I've seen my kids, and I've talked to others, that they are struggling, right? They're really struggling to, whether it's the hybrid approach or school or being home all alone, by themselves. They're not in proms, they're not experiencing the football or the sports the way it is. I think that we are going to have a problem on our hands. And I think that's going to be another, aspect of how we're going to have to take care of and be mindful of this as it evolves, because, they're going to be, I fear that people are going to see that, some of these kids are going to be considered skaters, right? And the fact that most colleges now are doing no SATs, right? Because of COVID, and they were going down that path anyway. But now they're starting to be SAT optional or ACT optional. And I could just imagine when they start getting into the workforce and they start colliding with us, right? And we know that they didn't. Boy, oh boy, what kind of psychological impact that's going to have on them. We really need to be prepared and figure out how do we deal with that. That's going to be, I don't know what that's called, but I think that's going to be another parameter.
Right. I think one way to understand people is to be around people and to have that shared experience. So I do appreciate what you're saying about kids. It's very hopeful that there's so much diversity in our classrooms today, but it's a little difficult when you're working, when you're doing all of that from home.
Yeah.
I do have a couple of job-related questions. One is about just in general about IT. One is that the path to the CIO is changing. How you get to be a CIO is very different. And it doesn't seem like it's necessarily an IT background that gets you the top job. So I'm curious on what your thoughts are, and can an organization benefit from someone outside a pure technology path make it today in the CIO world?
So I think a few years ago that may have been the case. It's not as much so now that you're not a technologist to be a CIO. There's certifications now for to become a CIO. Whether it's HIMSS or Chime, there are these certification components, and even so, I have not seen in the past few years a non IT person becoming a CIO unless this is a smaller organization, right? You tend to see smaller organizations that they give it to a nurse that, or a radiation person, or, a doctor or something like that. And they just said, hey, you take that. We used to see that a lot years ago, but that has gone away. But I do see smaller organizations, and that's not for me being flippant at all to smaller institutions. But when you start to get into the, hundreds and billion-dollar enterprises, you definitely tend to see technologists, right? Not saying they have to all be, they could be data scientists, they could be CISOs, they could be others, but you really need to have, I would say, go to the traditional model. If you didn't go to school, at the end of the day, you got to know the business of healthcare, right? That's what's most important.
Right.
If you're looking to be a CIO in healthcare, it is. And once you get to know the business, and I really mean that, understanding the dynamics of how it operates, you can kind of make those other things work for you.
Right. I do have a question about that one of our panelists, actually from an earlier session, really appreciates your story and wants me to thank you, and has asked the question that most can recognize in theory that a more diverse decision-making body today will yield the best results. So do you know of any quantitative results in healthcare that might support the fact that diversity leads to better decision-making?
Yeah, I don't have it in healthcare, but there's definitive data out there that will say that is the case. And I don't have this study outright, but I can reassure you that you could go out there and find it. There's that evidence. Now, it's interesting because, even in Silicon Valley over the last few years, there's been a backlash to diversity. And you're seeing people saying that they don't want, they whatever reason, they don't believe in that philosophy. I find it interesting, Silicon Valley, because there's a lot of different people there. But I don't know which factor that they're protesting, but you did see the big boys, right? The Amazons and the Googles kind of get that opponent. So I do see that there is almost a counter argument that's going on over the last few years about that. But I can just speak for myself. Look, I can tell you, I truly, Cletus, me, I bring something different to the table. Why? My experiences, and we all do, we all have the experiences, but my unique set of experiences in my journey has gotten me to see the world a little differently, right? It's those laurels that I don't rest on. It's being able to, and other people have different scenarios, not being born with a silver spoon in my mouth, and being able to understand the dynamics of being reared, going through crack, infested New York, and being able to see that how different industries and different experiences that I've gone to being able to navigate through has been able to say, let me take something from this industry, this sector, this vertical, this indices, and be able to apply it to what we're doing in healthcare. So that experience diversity in that case, right, has been essential to my career. And I think that's essential. Again, it's how we define diversity. I'm a broad stroke person of what diversity could be. Socioeconomic, all of these, there's so many factors that you can apply there. And again, I know there are many people out there that are in very similar situations.
Okay, we have a couple more questions for you. One is from a Caucasian woman who said she's had a lot of opportunity in her life, and she would like to know how to start the conversation with young people that don't have the same opportunities, to let them know that what she's achieved is possible for them as well.
Yeah, I'll give you a quick story. When we were having our first diversity initiative, it was at HIMSS. We were having our first one, and it was a big shindig. And I was talking to Russ Branzel, who's a CEO for Chime. He's going to be here tomorrow. We were outside and we created it, and he joked around. He's like, "Oh, I can't come in there. I'm a white guy from Texas." So we joke around, we play around, and the funny part is, no, we need partners. We need partners. We need people like you, and he knows that. But he wouldn't be co-signing this process, right? But I say to you that we need allies, right? The allies, and again, it doesn't have to be black, white. The many more allies that we want. I think one of the major things, I've done some of these sessions, and to look around the room and seeing a significant amount of white males, Caucasian males, and in a meeting of diversity, that says volumes to what we need to do as a society. It speaks a lot. So I say to you, continue, create some of the things that we talked about, create some of the challenges, go out to communities, whether it's, schools or other, and offer your services. Tell people that, hey, there's opportunities. Talk about IT, talk about your skill set, talk about how you could potentially train or help train people in that particular, that skill that you have. That's a lot to go a long way in order to share this kind of great information you have and those skills.
Okay. I have a question about your personal experience in your travels. And have you ever had to draw the line or explain differences between authentic questions about culture or race, or maybe even politics, versus questions that could be harmful to the culture of the workplace?
Have I had to draw the line? Yes, I believe I've had to. Sometimes you never know where things are coming from, right? Questions are coming from, whether it's their own personal experience or their challenge. So even in today's world, when questions come out and they and hopefully I'm answering your question correctly, but we start talking about politics and the divisive world that we're in today with politics. Those questions sometimes are influenced by political meandering, right? Depending on what side of the fence you're on. And sometimes you just get to, no, that's not appropriate. And you look at your colleagues, and sometimes your colleagues can come in and help you. Again, maybe not the best answer for that, but I do see that there's some bias going on when it comes to some of those questions, and you just have to, adult up. Know what's going to happen, and you're not going to change everybody's mind, and you just have to help them, through that journey, and understanding not everybody's journey is going to be the same.
I just want to ask Diane, do we have time for a few more questions, because there's still several that are coming in?
Yes, we do.
Okay, very good. Okay, this is great. So we have a question from someone from who grew up in Michigan, Cletus, and appreciates your message. He grew up was in school in Michigan during race riots, and had young friends that had lessons that they can share to take these steps forward. And they're a very mixed diverse group, white, Jewish, Spanish, Mexican, Greek, Black. And so they just didn't understand at the time about why their parents didn't get along. And I think a lot of us, you know, as we've grown up have experienced that. So what would be your comment on that kind of situation?
Well, I think that, you know, we have to remind ourselves that, again, if I look back at my family, right, I have family members that have grown up in a certain time. You know, it's not that long ago that people couldn't vote, or people were, you know, the Civil Rights Act, you know, my family was, you know, my mother, and, you know, they were operating there. So there's a lot of scars there, and you have to understand that. And, you know, knowing that no matter what you're going to do, that's why I mentioned the Thanksgiving statement, you know, the uncle conversation, you're not going to be able to change people. I was having a conversation with a family member, and we were talking about just politics and voting, and the person wasn't that old, but growing up in the 60s and the challenges, that what they said is, same argument, same thing, I don't need to vote, right? And at first I came out, you know, what do you mean? You know, how do you not vote? Like, how do you, you know, and then once I listened to the individual, I heard that what they were experiencing was frustration, right? That's what they were really basically talking about is, I'm tired of the same thing and nothing happening. And I heard, I think it was President Obama say, and I found that a very interesting statement, that, you know, in some cases, there are people who had to die to go vote, white, Black, and different. And we don't have the option. They didn't have the option, you know, their lives were lost on that. And if anybody was mad, should be mad, it should be them, right? Or they should have those pains continuing. And I found that so powerful of a message. But even so, those who had those pains of those years still go out and vote. So I use voting as an example, you know, but it transformed to anything that we're talking about: race, riots, issues, you know, whatever. I think we have to remember that the folks, their experiences were real, and sometimes those scars are hard to move. So we just have to be there to help them, and understand that sometimes we're not going to change them, but we can be that next wave of people. What we don't want to do, though, is perpetuate that to the next generation, and next generation, and next generation.
Right.
That we can do, right? That we can do. We can stop that.
Right. Do you think that, or do you agree that we have an opportunity to help our diverse communities understand about growing into careers in IT? You mentioned earlier about having unused devices on the weekends available and being able to promote that. So what are your thoughts about how we can get into diverse communities?
Yeah, so there's a few things. So not only just using your not used cycles of compute, but, you know, I put a challenge to my team is, look, we have a lot of technology, right? And that technology gets retired. And, you know, we know right now a lot of kids are going to, they have to, you know, do school from home. And there's opportunities for us to say, hey, we have to, normally in our world, and I know I'm speaking for a lot of us, we have to pay people to come and take our technology out of our hands because it's older or whatever. But, you know, one person's discard is somebody else's treasure. So then how do you then go into the communities? And what I did this in a recent organization. We had a bunch of iPads, you know, that were getting ready to be phased out, and we were doing a refresh because of software. The darn devices were still good. We took about 1,000 different units and we donated it to the city of Buffalo at the time, right? Worked with the mayor, worked closely with the mayor, and we were able to donate those devices to the city. And it was a win-win-win situation. Imagine if you're doing that same thing with your retired devices, wiping it out, partner with places like Microsoft or whoever, or Apple, and being able to secure them, DoD wipes and all of those, and be able to power them out back with operating systems so we can hand those back out for these kids that are unfortunately not having the technology. And work with your cable providers or internet providers to see if you can help them provide cable access. Not a plug, but Comcast, this is all Comcast country out here. Comcast has a great program that you could potentially partner with them because it's a subsidized internet access program for the Comcast customers. It's about $10 a month. What we're looking at doing potentially is, again, going in the community and say, hey, how can we basically sponsor some of that? And we could pay out of our own pockets, right, to be able to do it, whether we use hospital organization dollars,
Right.
Things that we have from the foundation, or even if we just choose to do it ourselves.
Right.
That's how we could get to the community to be able to say, we can use our unused cycles, get it back to the community, give them the upper hand, and help remove the digital divide.
Yeah, I don't know if I mentioned in the beginning that I am an IT director for healthcare informatics at RWJ Barnabas Health. And actually, we are just starting a program like that. We're starting to look at all of our laptops that we can wipe. The foundation is going to help us buy some software. So yeah, I think that's a great first step to get out there in the community.
Yep. Get them on Google, get them on Google Docs and all that. It's stuff you don't have to pay for, right? You could do it, and that people will love it.
Right.
People will love it.
Great. We just have a couple minutes left, so I want to make sure I get this one thing in here. How can people follow you on LinkedIn? Can they, so that they could stay in touch with you?
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know what my name is on. Cletus Earl. I think that I've never been asked that question. I just figure people look me up. I know I have enough followers. Yeah, Cletus Earl on LinkedIn. My email address is cearle1, CEARLE1 at pennstatehealth.psu.edu. Feel free to reach out to me.
We'll make sure that gets out.
Yeah, I'm an open book, right? I have to tell you, because our goal is to try to get, others engaged so we can start moving the narrative.
Mm-hmm. So your kids don't have you on the Insta?
I'm on Instagram. I could do that. Since we're not together, I did know LinkedIn has this little QR code feature that I've been using. So I don't even use cards anymore. I just use that, and people QR scan in, and LinkedIn to LinkedIn is cool.
There you go. That makes
I do. Remember that question earlier? I do have a little technology back.
So if we have any other, let's see, I think I might have scrolled past one. We might have one more. There is one about with COVID, college students are having a really tough time finding internships and getting in the door. Any suggestions?
Comprehensive internship program. We're building it out. I'm a big collaboration person. I worked with the M&T CIO, M&T Bank CIO. Basically, this is the only place where you could plagiarize. They allowed me to take their internship program over, or take what they've learned. We are starting to adopt that here. Get out to the community. I would be willing to share. We're in the infancy stage there, but willing to share what you need to do with interns. Yeah, we have, we're a pretty large school. We have 100,000 students. So we're looking at our schools, but we're not stopping there. We're looking all over for high performing academic institutions. I would just encourage you all, internship, and putting a programmatic effort in place so that you can measure success.
Okay. And mentorship. Right. If there's any questions we don't get to, we'll be sure to get them to you, Cletus, so you can answer. So I'm just going to take this last one, then we'll announce our winner, and I'll do the closing comments.
Good luck.
So moving from New York to rural Pennsylvania, are you seeing a difference in the community when it comes to accepting diversity outside of your place of employment?
Yeah. So this is near the Mason-Dixon line. So I have to tell you, New York City, a New Yorker, it's been a little interesting, seeing a lot of symbolism that's reflected that I'm not used to. A lot of Confederate flags, it's tough, right? Rural for me. So it's out there, but I knew where I'm coming, right? So, but the beauty behind it is our organization has decided to do something about it. So even if, from a reflection of the community, and it's not everybody, right? This is a loving place, but the organization is making that change. That's again why I'm so honored to be part of Penn State and Penn State University.
Okay, well, once again, I thank you for your time today. If anyone submitted a question that we didn't get to, we'll make sure that we get that to Cletus so that he can send you a response.
Yeah,
So thank you very much for your time today.
Yeah, no, thank you,
And,
Nina. Did I say, Nina, that my boss rocks? Steve Massini rocks. You can tell I like where I am.
Duly noted. Okay, so before we close for the day, the exhibit halls are open until 6:30 this evening. So I encourage you to go into the visitors hall. The vendors are out there. They would love to speak to you, and certainly gave us the ability to provide today's conference. We do have the winner of the $200 gift card. And I think that chat was closed. Hold on a second. And the winner is Diane. I can't find it now. Okay. And the winner is, hang on. See, this is just my ploy to keep you all on the phone. The winner is Carolyn Petty from Inspira Health Network. So congratulations to Caroline. And you'll be contacted. It'll probably be a virtual gift card sent to you for $200. So congratulations. Also, the slides will be available following the conference. So it'll probably be on our local websites for HIMSS in Delaware Valley. And I do want to remind you, tomorrow we start at 8 a.m. with another, we're starting with a panel in the morning. And we invite you all to join us. Today has been beyond our expectations. We've had wonderful attendance today. Thank you all. I hope you got a lot out of today's sessions, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. So with that, have a good night. Thank you.